Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we are talking all things Colorado Rockies. Let's face it, today's loss was a crime. It is another loss that is massive cheeks, for lack of better terms, just absolute meltdown. And it's funny, as I was watching the game and taking notes for the show. I was, you know, good vibes. Jake McCarthy hits a triple. I'm thinking, hey, maybe this will be a good vibe show. Antonio Senzatella, Jaden Hill are closing doors left and right. And then the ninth inning comes, and we'll talk about that. Quick game recap, though. Just some different notes for this game. If you didn't watch, and if you did watch, we can cover them here. One of the first big notes, though, is Kyle Freeland he just doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it. He did have a few strikeouts in this one. But even in that fifth inning where he got pulled and Jaden Hill did a great job of getting out of a jam, Freeland, it was all kind of a 2-out rally in the fifth inning. And Freeland, he just can't get out of it. And so he gives up a few runs in this one. He goes 4 2/3, 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, and the 4 strikeouts and 89 pitches. His ERA is now over 7, right? So we're getting close to that ACT score range for Kyle Freeland in terms of his ERA. Just not great stuff. You need to write your name on the ACT to probably score 7 is basically what I'm getting at. But not great overall from Kyle Freeland. But it wasn't all negative things, right? Like Jake McCarthy had a big time triple in this one, where the Rockies were able to drive him home in that fifth inning and then take the lead in the fifth inning. Troy Johnson once again clutch hitting. The broadcast shows, hey, guys with the best batting average with runners in scoring position. Troy Johnson's 3rd or 4th in baseball, and he knocks in Tyler Freeman. And there really was a quiet game from the 6th inning to the 9th inning. Like I said, Jaden Hill, Antonio Senzatella. Rockies pitching wasn't. Rockies hitting really wasn't great in this one. Another game, less than 10 hits, but they do have 8 hits. 8 hits isn't bad by any means, but I will note one thing that maybe it's nitpicky, but again, the Rockies have an opportunity with the bases loaded, and all they're able to do is score a single run. It was a Kyle Karros, this was another note I had. The challenges, ABS challenges, really friendly to the Rockies in this one. Kyle Karros challenges what would have been a called strike 3, gets reversed into a ball 4, that scores a run. And then in the 5th inning, when Tyler Freeman knocked in an RBI, had an RBI single to knock in Johnson, he also has an ABS challenge that would have been a strike 3. Instead, gets reversed. Next pitch, single, drives in Johnson. But ultimately, the issue is the Rockies are getting runners in scoring position. They are getting the bases juiced now multiple times in this series where the Rockies had the bases loaded, and they scored 2 runs against Mackenzie Gore, and they just score 1 run in this one. It's not enough. If you have your foot on an opponent's throat, you've got to take advantage of it. You need to be able to score runs, and they weren't able to do that in this. But look, they still scored 4 runs in this game, which isn't great by any means, but they were still somewhat productive. And look, they got shut down in really the 8th and 9th inning, but you thought, hey, maybe the pitching can get it done. And that was a note I had in the 7th inning. Can the Rockies hold a late lead? Because they have shown oftentimes that they struggle holding on to leads. And what do the Rockies do? They blow another 9th inning lead in this one, and it is unfortunately at the hands of Brennan Bernardino. But it was a wacky 9th inning. Like, it is a catcher's interference from Brett Sullivan. Um, and so get a base runner there. Um, then Bernardino is accredited for 2 hits in this, but both not like anything crazy. Weak infield single, very weak infield single, or excuse me, weak single, and then a very weak infield single has the bases juiced. It's funny. Bernardino gets the first out of the inning, and then all 3 of these things happen one after another. Juan Mejia comes in, and then Brett Sullivan, and it's an 0-1 count, and Mejia gets Young swinging, I believe, right off of Sullivan's glove. Turns into a pass ball. Rangers tie the game. RBI single right after by Young, and that's the game. The Rangers win 5-4. Nothing happening in the ninth for the Rockies. Really quickly, too, Foscue also dominated the Rockies in this entire series. He was just great at the plate for the Rangers. But look, this is another bad loss. What I'm trying to get at here, another bad loss for the Rockies in a game that they should have won. Right, like just off the top of your head, this is now really twice against the Rangers where they have tried to blow a lead or have blown a lead. They lose this one. They win the first game of the series. Against the Phillies, they blew a lead, but were able to still win it. Against the Braves, they blew a lead and lost it. And then you think back to that Padres game last month, kind of near the end of April, in which they were up and ended up blowing that lead as well. The Braves won stings because they were up big, and just the Braves slowly chipped away, winning that game. And it's just, once again, the pitching that we're so excited for at the start of the year. We have seen limitations. We've seen weaknesses. And ultimately, this is a weird one because Brendan Bernardino wasn't like he was getting knocked around. Some strange circumstances. It could have very well been 2 outs, right? And when he faced the rest of this Rangers lineup. But that's just not how it shakes out. And it wasn't just pitching in this. It was also poor fielding. Brett Sullivan, just a horrible 9th inning from him with the interference as well as the pass ball. And that's that. And so the Rockies lose in another game in which they had a late lead and fall apart. And it's a bummer that it's become a storyline, and it's hard not to notice and pay attention to, and it makes you realize, look, the Rockies have a lot of things that they will need to address as they continue to build this roster and rebuild this team to be a competitor in the NL West, to try to compete for a spot, a wild card spot, and division titles probably way down the line. But I think it also brings up the point of the need of just getting a certified closer. Now, the Rockies have relievers that are foxhole guys that you trust. I think Jaden Hill has now earned that. Once again, a really solid appearance from Hill, getting out of a jam and then really looking solid in the 6th. Antonio Sensatella is obviously in that club. He has been phenomenal this year, and who knows what his overall timeline looks for the Rockies. Again, he's another name that I wouldn't be surprised that the Rockies consider trading at the deadline as teams look for pitching. I think he's a phenomenal piece to maybe deal, but right now he's arguably the best Rockies reliever. And then you have some other names. Brendan Bernardino's okay. Jimmy Herget's okay. Halverson is up and down, but can be good. And Juan Mejia is up and down, can be good. So look, they have some solid relievers. This is by no means a bad bullpen, but it is a glaring issue that in the 9th inning, you really don't know who's going to be getting the call to try to save the day for the Rockies. And so I think that is an area that maybe it's not the first place that they focus on, but it will be something that needs to be addressed, especially if you have the idea of, hey, we can keep this bullpen together, which I think they absolutely should at least look to keeping some of these guys and then bolstering the rest of it. Look, Sensatella has a 1.19 ERA. Jaden Hill has a 2.8 ERA. And Bernardino and Mejia are both guys under 4 ERAs, 3.86, 3.8. Like, Rockies relievers with those kind of ERAs, like, those are hard to come by. You need to be able to hold on to at least some of those guys. Senzatella and Bernardino, obviously a little bit older, but still, you've got some really solid young relievers. Now can you go and find a closer? Find someone that can be able to shut the door for you when needed. If you look at possible relievers next year for 2027, you can kind of go the route of going after the grandpas of the world. So Kirby Yates, Kenley Jansen, Aroldis Chapman, those last two having team options, but they could be available. So there is that route if you're not willing to make that commitment to a closer, and you could see the Rockies maybe holding off on signing any closer after next year. Just saying, hey, in this rebuild, maybe that's the finishing or final touch. The Rockies could also go a second route, which is, hey, you know what? We want to spend some money. You could go after a guy like Jose Alvarado, Brian Abreu. Again, those guys are going to be more expensive. They are probably guys who are going to want to be on competing teams. Guys like Abreu are interesting too because he gives up a lot of hard hit balls, but he also creates a lot of ground balls. He's a four seam and slider. He uses a four seam and slider. Alvarado would be really interesting because he's a lefty, which the Rockies desperately need, and has a nasty sinker that could be really productive at Coors Field. That follows the track of Alan Likman. So maybe it's not Jose Alvarado because the Rockies aren't ready for someone like Alvarado, but that is maybe the type of guy that you're looking at to be a certified closer for the Rockies. The Rockies have had some good closers in the past. We all think of probably Houston Street. You can think of Manny Corpus, Brian Fuentes. The Rockies have had some really solid guys, and I think for them to be in a position of competing once again, one of the final touches on this detail of a rebuild will be getting a good, I want to say great, but at least a good closing pitcher because they just don't have that right now. They have good relievers. They have good setup men. They need a good closer to shut the door. And maybe that's not a target for this offseason, but it's something that they should consider. The last route that I meant to touch on as well, maybe you develop just one of these young guys into a closer. Juan Mejia has been kind of getting more looks in the ninth inning. Jaden Hill throws extremely hard. He has been effective, but do they see him more as a setup man? So those are some of the navigation points that the Rockies will need to look at when they approach this next offseason and when they approach something that is a need, and that is finding a closer for this team. But look, that's the future. Let's talk about the now. The Rockies are taking on Arizona Diamondbacks, who they just played recently. The D-backs handled the Rockies. Now the Rockies go on the road to take on the Diamondbacks in a 4-game series. And the Rockies, they lost 2 out of 3 the first time they played the Diamondbacks. And this is a really interesting stretch for Colorado because the month of May has not been kind to the Rockies. They're now 11 games under 500. They are the seller of the NL West, the seller of the NL, and only the the Los Angeles Angels, have a worse record currently in the league. That's not to say there aren't a bunch of other teams that have 1 or 2 more wins than the Rockies, but this has been a pretty tough slide, and it's hurt because of the ways that the Rockies have lost. Yes, they've had some losses where they're losing by 8, 9, 10 runs, and you say, you know what, those stink, but whatever. This isn't a great team. Those losses will happen. It's the losses that we just experienced against the Rangers where it's completely preventable, and the Rockies just can't get out of their own way. We talked about it before the year, that margin for error. is super slim. You can't make mistakes in crucial situations, and the Rockies have been making those kind of mistakes. So this is a series where Arizona, third in the division, just a couple games back of the Padres, and it's a pretty solid Diamondbacks team. In terms of predictions, who knows? Who knows, especially just with how the starting pitching has looked for the Rockies. The hope would be you can take 2 out of 4, but with how this slide has been, we will just have to wait and see. So with that, that does it for another Rockies Daily. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please make sure you leave a comment. Hit that like button. Share with your friends, your family, loved ones. Maybe you're a ship in the night and you pass by another, and you can share with them as well. But regardless of what you end up doing, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Thursday, and I will see you tomorrow.